Hello and welcome to Auspol Explained. I'm your long curly haired host David. Today I'm going to be talking with an actual candidate for the upcoming election to talk about what's it like being a candidate in an upcoming election. You know, what's involved in the day-to-day, how do you get money, what importance do volunteers have, and just all the sort of nitty-gritty considerations that you have to have when you want to be a candidate. To be clear, this is not a promo for this candidate. We're not going to be talking about his policies. We're going to be talking about what work there is involved in a campaign. And with all that housekeeping done, let's dive into our interview. Can you please introduce yourself and give a brief physical description for accessibility purposes?
Thanks very much, David. So my name's Nathan Barton. I'm a candidate in the federal election. I think I'm just your regular sort of guy, short back and sides haircut with dark hair.
Just a quick disclaimer before we get into this. Just because I'm interviewing you does not mean that I'm endorsing you as a candidate. Auspol Explained has many people on different political parties and independents. And it is just generally should be accepted that I'm not endorsing or disendorsing any of my particular guests, but as it is an election, I just want to highlight that particularly and also point out I can't vote for you. If anyone is in more, though, I do encourage them to look up your policies, as I encourage them to look up the policies of all the other candidates and judge them accordingly. But still, you have some valuable insight as a candidate, because what I want to talk about today is the behind the scenes of what it's like to be a candidate. What does an election campaign involve? This is your first election campaign, correct?
Absolutely. So complete novice at it to date. But yeah, absolutely keen to talk about some of those things and share the experiences that I have learned along the way with some amazing people that have supported me, and hopefully help other people to see how they might be able to get involved down the track or even the last 2 weeks with us.
You have been campaigning for a while now. Can you tell us what the day-to-day or just, week to week of an election campaign is like? What do you get up to?
Sure, yeah, well, it's always something interesting. I've got to tell you from the outset, there's always a new challenge for the day, and always a bigger challenge or a bigger task to be thinking about over the week, and even come months. So for me, we started really on Christmas Eve is when the campaign started, and there's just essentially from the very outset a huge amount of work to actually achieve before we even get started into the campaigning. To think of it overall, as an independent especially, where you really are starting from zero, from scratch, you got to think of it as phases, where there's the establishment phase of the actual team and the entity of what you are representing and how you're functioning through. Then there's the planning phase of how the campaign's going to roll out, and then obviously the execution of that plan in terms of the actual campaigning. So that establishment phase is really about setting up a small business, for want of a better word, where there's ABNs to register and premises to lease, logos to design, a whole bunch of things that are just kind of not just handed to you as an independent, which is a big, massive amount of part of the work from the outset. But then when you're moving into the planning phase, there's a lot of support that you can get access to online, and support networks, people that are really keen to support the independent movement are offering their support and expertise. And that's where you learn about marketing, I guess, or how to connect with voters, how to connect with people out in the electorate and the methodology behind that. But then the actual campaigning is the fun bit. For us, a regular day might look like going out to meet people that have organised to catch up via our contact points, so through social media or our email or phone call, to actually meet them in person. There'll be times when we're meeting smaller groups where they've organised a bit of a kitchen table catch-up or a catch-up in a cafe. So you get to speak to a small group of interconnected people through friendship groups. That's their friendship groups. And then parts of it is also the hard slog of flyering, door knocking, and canvassing calls as well, where we're reaching out to certain parts of the community to literally to touch base and actually have a point of connection with as many people as we can. And there's a little bit of a rinse and repeat to that, where you kind of just get on a bit of a cycle, and you know what your day looks like. But then there's also the other times where there might be an event that specifically you've been invited to, where you're being hosted. I've got to say, there's some of my favourites, because a lot of the work has been done by others, and you're there just to engage with people that have a similar view or value on some particular issue. And then on the flip side, there's the events that we organise ourselves. And that's where you really rely on your network of volunteers to do like incredible amounts of work, I've got to say, that other people are doing for me as the candidate to help get these things set up. And then, yeah, being the host or being the the person of contact that's facilitating a discussion or whatever it might be. So last night we had a mental health forum where we had guest panelists and we're able to talk about some of the important things around the mental health space that we'd like to be able to do better should we get elected and bring those concepts to the parliament.
Could you elaborate on these events? So what kind of different events are there?
I guess the more commonly held ones, we call them politics in the park or politics in the pub occasionally, or politics in a cafe. So sort of putting out an open invite to a particular area. We will have flyed that area beforehand, pay for some push advertising within social media, and then also utilising existing networks to get the word out there, to invite people down and to have a chat. And so sometimes, in some suburbs where there's really activated, politically minded people, we've had groups of about 40 people turn up, and they ask questions, or I give them a spiel of what some of the things I'm standing for. Then obviously conversations and questions launch from there. And yeah, that's that engagement that I just really love, because that's bringing people into the space of helping them to feel like they really are having an impact from their own perspective, because they're helping me to understand something from that local group's knowledge or expertise about. But there's also a two-way street where they're also hearing my views and my perspective on things and why it might be different to the current alternative options. The other example, on a larger scale, like last night, so there was a solid amount of weeks worth of work to try and find the panelists, and that's including people with availability, obviously, but also their expertise. And so with my mental health background, I had a lot of strong networks to touch base within. Not everybody was available, unfortunately, but with the ones that we had were really exceptional panelists with their own discrete level of knowledge. So bringing that all together took a lot of work, and that's where our wonderful volunteers were able to put that time and effort in without me having to think about things. But yeah, having that expertise come together is then getting the audience and bringing that invite to, again, through the networks of people that are interested in this space. Because we wanted that to be a forum where there was a discussion with people in our local electorate to hear from them what their experiences were and where the shortfalls of the health system overall are being encountered. We've already had feedback through our emails and things where people have walked away from that forum going, I didn't know that service existed, didn't know that community group was still available. Lots of other support mechanisms that were there for people to take away tangibly. So that's why we put so much effort into that particular event, because it's a really important discussion, regardless of the 3rd of May.
You're talking a lot about, contacting the public through various ways. Door knocking and events are also very important. Another great way to reach people is the media. Have you managed to get any success contacting the media or having the media interview you? Is there a way for candidates to effectively engage with the media, have you found?
Yeah, look, that's definitely a big challenge to crack. We understand it's about relevance and having a point of difference potentially on a perspective. But in a campaign, I think from an independence perspective, it's pretty difficult to cut through what the major parties are dominating with. There's an element of media needing to sell what they're selling, and so they want to make sure that the audience is clearly being delivered the things that they want to know about. And in Western Australia specifically, I think there's a real challenge of breaking outside of that kind of concentrated media landscape. And so, yeah, when we're talking about one electorate versus the whole of the metro area or the whole of the state, or obviously national type topics, we accept and understand that it's a difficult balance for producers and the executives to make decisions on. So yeah, they're certainly reaching out through the media releases. We've had some coverage in terms of different announcements that we've made. There's a lot of interest in the preferences that we want to, that people are curious about, but we're pretty clear about where we stand on that, which is a boring story, I think, when we're running an open ballot. So yeah, there's difficulties to break into that space. But yeah, we accept that there's decisions to be made for their own interests. So happy with that outcome.
Let's talk about how you actually got into this. So you're a psychologist by trade, a very busy profession, I would imagine, and you've decided to get into politics, which is also a very busy profession. Fun fact, actually, I got approached late last year, I think it was, by a Voices for movement, and they were like, hey David, would you be interested in potentially being an independent candidate for insert electorate here that I also don't live in? And I was like, oh, wow, thank you. No. The idea of having to spend so long flying back and forth to Canberra and doing all the hard work that politicians do doesn't appeal to me. I love politics. I don't want to be a politician. It seems very tiring and time consuming, and yet you've decided that, you know what, you'll give it a very good go, and that seems like the good thing for you. So how did you come to that decision? How did you decide, you know what, I want to be a member of parliament?
Yeah, look, it was not an easy decision, I can tell you. And my starting point was exactly what you just described, where I had no interest, no intention to head in this pathway. I was very happy with my small business. I love the employees that we have on our team. I'm so grateful for their loyalty to continue what we've got without me being part of the day-to-day management there. And there's a lot of sacrifice that I had to weigh up, being for myself personally, if it was really in my own interest to go down this line in terms of what I could cope with. And so it started with that conversation from the Voices of More, where I went to a barbecue and hoped to get behind somebody else that they were going to be supporting, and was really wanting to get involved as a support person, volunteered to the organisation, to that group. But yeah, they flipped it on me, and after sharing some views and perspectives and kind of meeting more and more people through that really open-minded and kind, caring, compassionate people that I was feeling connected with from those first couple of meetings, they asked me if I would have potential to put my hat in the ring. And I had to really weigh that up in terms of what it would mean. They described to me that they saw attributes about me and my background that they believed the electorate would connect with. And so that's why they were kind of intent on having me consider it. But once making that decision of, well, I do see myself as a person of service. I have been in the Army Reserves for 22 years and know that that's a core part of who I am as a value of mine. And I get a lot of meaning and purpose out of that sense of serving others. And I saw this as an opportunity. Could I make a bigger difference by being successful at this process and actually being a representative of more? That was all the decision making behind in my mind. And yeah, having made the decision, I've absolutely never looked back, because it's such a learning experience. There's such a huge opportunity to connect with people through the process of running a campaign, and feeling like I am making a difference already. Regardless of the outcome, we absolutely feel like we're making a difference of bringing people together, helping people to understand the power of their vote and how preferences work, and all the conversations that we're having around how important it is to have your say and to raise your voice. That alone makes it worth it for me. And it's evidently clear for me that I've demonstrated how important my pride in Australia is, and do hope to be able to make it better by representing the people. Like, it's kind of really, it sounds so simple that it's cliched, but it's just genuinely, that's how simple it is.
Speaking of the Voices for More movement, there's a bunch of independents running. They're backed by Voices for Insert Place Here movements that are sort of these community-led groups that want to back an independent. It sounds like they had multiple ideas for who they'd like to back. Now, the thing about, if you were to run for a political party, you'd have to go through pre-selection. It sounds kind of like you did the independent version of pre-selection. Could you tell us what that process was like?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it's a really good way to think about it as a kind of a concept that people can understand. So I think, first of all, to get an understanding of the Voices Off movement, it really does go back to the electorate of Indi with Cathy McGowan. But the essential background to it is that it takes a handful of people to get together from a particular area to say, this is our electorate and we want to have a representative who represents us. And so with that mission statement, for want of a better word, they put work and effort in. I wasn't part of that original group by any means, but they put work and effort in to work out a plan and a strategy, kind of the same as what I described before, to connect with people from the local area, people who are passionate, caring and available, to try and drive in a momentum towards getting like a grassroots groundswell up and running. And once they get to a certain stage, I'm imagining, this is again part of the process that I wasn't part of, they would hold what they call kitchen table conversations, or a similar sort of process that others might call something differently. And that's again just actually seeking information from all sectors of the community that they live in. What are the issues that are most important to them? And so I think that's the first point of a clear differentiation, where certain areas of Australia will have different issues that are important to them and different attributes of a candidate that they'd like to see represent that particular location. And so once they have that out, they'd put it into a report, publish it, make it available, because it's all about transparency, and then actively seek available or viable candidates. And so I know for the Voices of More group, they actually paid a significant amount of money to publish it in the local West Australian newspaper to really make it as broad publication as possible, almost like a gazette. But before that and beyond that, they were reaching out to networks, reaching out to people within, like LinkedIn scenarios to try and identify viable candidates. And in that process, I ended up being one of those people that they effectively approached from me being involved in the get-together groups that they were organising. And so that is a pre-selection of sorts, where you're applying to be endorsed by this existing group of people, which is not just the original group, it's kind of the collective overall, because they've set their standards and values. And it's a thorough investigation, I've got to say. It's the most thorough job application vetting process that I've been through. And there's about, really drilling into whether you're constitutionally eligible. So I had to renounce my right of abode before I could even be considered. That's again like my own cost, which is perfectly fine. But when it wasn't too particularly attached to that as my future, as an Army reservist, had to make sure I was aware of what I needed to do to resign from that position, because you can't be a candidate and a serving member of the Defence Force. My own business, I really had to work out with expertise, consulting legal positions as well, about the ramifications of still having an involvement in that, because I'm not financially set up to be able to just let it go, unfortunately. But yeah, so a lot of processes around that before you could even be considered, and then once they're established, then there's that process of making sure that you're the right person, values wise and attributes wise, and the commitments to what you believe wholeheartedly, in terms of the issues that are related to this particular area.
Now, the thing is, the AEC only recently had its official declaration of nominations of candidates. It was the 11th, was it? Oh, I can't even read my own handwriting. You weren't technically officially a candidate until then, right?
Correct, yeah.
But you've set up all this work months in advance to be a candidate. Is there any sort of legal thing that you need to adhere to before you're officially nominated? Or is it just more of a well, if you're not serious, no one will pay attention to you. It's just a matter of dedication, reaching to the point where you fill out that nomination form?
There absolutely are differing legal not ramifications, but applications of the law throughout that process. To be honest, a lot of this is kind of already outside of my memory, because you kind of deal with it at the time, utilising references and documents from the AEC and things like that. So a lot of it is about being prepared and ensuring that you meet the standards before the 11th, the official nomination date. You only have 10 days to go through that process. Once the writs are signed, there's a really formatted procedural steps that will occur. And so being prepared for all of those things beforehand is really what's critical. But there are things that, with the ATO that you have to be aware of. Authorizations and the like still apply in terms of political advertising. There's the entity itself to be able to receive donations and money, because it is about being financed. That has to be set up correctly. So there's lots of different levels of technical knowledge that needs to be complied with throughout that preliminary process. And that's where the existing established parties have such a massive advantage, because all of that's just taken care of automatically. Whereas with an independent, the responsibility sits on my shoulders, and I've got an amazing campaign manager, so I'm so grateful for her expertise and diligence and attention to detail. But it's still genuinely about having that knowledge yourself to make sure that everything is above board, because the last thing you want to do is, God forbid, being elected and then you're not compliant from the constitutional perspective. That would be a terrible outcome, and something I'd be, just would feel so drastically bad for, because it would mean a by-election, and that's huge amounts of money being re-spent.
Speaking of money, can we talk about money?
Yeah, for sure. It's a commonly asked question, so why not?
You need to finance your campaign. I mean, everyone needs to finance their campaign. And this comes from a variety of sources, community donations. I don't know if you have any corporate donations or backing or whatnot. However, are you financially backed by 200 or just Climate 200, or are you just endorsed by Climate 200? Because I believe you are on the Climate 200 website. What's the relationship there?
I guess the key point to understand about Climate 200 is that they're a fundraising organisation. They get money from, I think it's over 40,000 people now, probably much more, because that was earlier on when they quoting those figures. So 40,000 different donors to Climate 200 effectively establishes that pool of money. And what they have is really clearly is a statement on what type of candidacy they would be willing to support, and that's about being aligned with the values, particularly around climate change, rights for women and equality, and just integrity within politics as well. So they're really clear about their messaging. And from the Voices of More group, they were really clear about what their standard of candidacy that they were wanting to support from the volunteer space. And so once that's kind of aligned in terms of the right person being chosen, the process is to request from Climate 200 if you wanted their funding from that. So if you don't want the funding, if you don't need the money, you don't need to, but you might still be very well aligned and still kind of endorse, for want of a better word, in terms of the alignment on values. But if you're in a situation like I was, you need money to get started. And so we started that with some of our own injection of money, in terms of my partner and I, other volunteers who were really keen and knowledgeable of who I am and aware of the commitment that I was able to be willing to make. They were able to put money in. And of course, we sought and requested money as a donation from Climate 200, and that gets us started with resources that are really essential. Things like design, technical knowledge around, what a campaign strategy looks like, just the structure of a campaigning organisation. There's some training that is able to be provided, and then there's connection with other community-based resources, which is a huge part of this whole process, which I really think doesn't get enough attention. So much of the support is not just about dollars; it's about connecting to other like-minded people. So yeah, that's the connection to Climate 200. But there's also about knowledge and wisdom around how to generate your own money through your community. So we've reached out to our local residents, and we're always asking for people donating their time, people donating their talents if they've got particular skills, and of course people donating their treasure if they have that luxury or ability to do so, which is really tough in a cost of living crisis. That takes out the availability of people's disposable income to be able to donate into things that they would normally be able to have a real passion for. And so we're seeing, I think, a disproportionate amount of volunteering for time compared to the financial side of things. But we're just grateful for every bit of gift that anyone's willing to give. It's all for the best outcome that we can possibly deliver on the day.
What do you spend money on mostly? Like, what's the most valuable thing that a campaign spends money on?
I guess summarises advertising. So advertising either through social media platforms or the physical signage that you see. We understand that the physical signs have a really powerful message in the local community, but social media is also part of that, as well as video on demand. They're the main expenses.
You've got multiple things in your campaign that you need. You need money, you need volunteers. Which one would you say is the most valuable?
Oh, easily volunteers. The more people that you have doing things more often, you're getting your message out as clearly and directly to the people who would care the most. But there would be a balance to that. Obviously, you can only go so far with personal networks or connections, and reaching outside of those existing networks is where the advertising side of things comes in. And then you get more volunteers from that as well. So yeah, it would be the balance, but I easily would believe people is where it's all at.
Thank you very much for your time and your insight. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we go?
Just thank you to you, David. Yeah,
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your day.
you too. Thanks, mate.
And there you have it. Thank you so much to Nathan for his time and expertise, giving us a little bit of an insight into what it's like to be a candidate. You heard him, volunteers are essential to a campaign. They're incredibly useful. So look up the candidates in your area, find one that you support, and consider maybe volunteering and helping their campaign, or potentially donating. You heard him as well. Money is important. As always, here at Auspol Explained, we, by which I mean me, I'm the only one involved in this, I encourage you to get involved and participate in democracy in as many ways as possible. And that's it from me. Don't forget to share, subscribe, comment down below what you would like to learn about next or who you'd like me to interview next. And of course, thank you so much to my supporters on Patreon who, when they're not donating to other people's political campaigns, they're supporting me give free education to you all. Get ready and excited for the upcoming election. I'll see you at the polls.